in the time we've been there since 1974, it's become significantly less agrarian and very removed from this sort of thing. So we have our challenges, which are very different from neighboring Lee, which has protected and maintained a higher degree of agrarianism. It's got some of the same problem as Durham, but it's protected a much higher degree of agrarianism, so those folks have been able to do a lot more than Durham has been able to do, but we've pushed through with an AgCom and a few other things, but there's still some people scratching their heads in Durham saying, are we those kind of people? Is this appropriate for us? Do we have any farms? Could we have any farms? What is this all about?
Why don't we, for every farm we set up in town, UNH pay taxes to the town?
Yeah, UNH, right, yeah. Durham has its, well, Durham has benefits and challenges that relate to the fact that the university is in Durham. But remember, the university is paid for equally by all the people of the state. It's owned by all of the people of the state, but who has the most direct access? The people of Durham, more than anybody, has the most direct access to this university. And the poor folks in southwestern New Hampshire or northern New Hampshire have very limited access, but they still own the place. Now, they're not paying so much in operational budget. You may know about the big budget cuts from the state legislature to the university. Operational budget is 7% now from this.
We did get a presentation here, though, with
Good.
the UNH plan, and we're going to move, they're going to develop west of the campus now. And that's going to take out all that agricultural land, take out the UNH woods, take out carbine. I think that's what they presented.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. But we do have an agricultural experiment station, and there are certain issues with certain of those lands that do protect them for agriculture. So there are different.
Are there still people that want to? Are there enough people that want to do that backbreaking work? I mean, I had all I could do to keep my 8x10 plot going.
Right. There are a lot of young people who are very passionate and very excited. And Maine and Vermont have much bigger numbers than New Hampshire, by the way. And if you spend any time in those states, you become to realize how many are doing that. But I would say they're balanced, and they're working for themselves. They are not being exploited by other people. They're working for themselves. They're building a future, but they're smart enough to be balanced. Interestingly, a lot of them have university degrees, and those degrees are in liberal arts. They're in history. They're in philosophy. They're in Spanish language and so forth. They're not in agriculture. But it's very interesting, this return to agrarianism and this return to the land. But I wanted to point out that when you look at Strafford County and you see what could be identified as prime agricultural land, you might tend to think, well, the rest of it isn't so suitable. But agriculture is suitable in one form or another almost everywhere. And I go along with Eric Sawtell of Lee, one of the leaders of a town agricultural commission in Lee, who has advised us in Durham and has advised other people that you shouldn't get too hung up on the idea of districts, like saying this is the agricultural district of our town, or planners more broadly looking at a county and making assumptions that agriculture is going to be in one place but not in another place. You can produce food in most places, and especially if you're talking about grazing. There's very little that can't be done in most places, whether it's those tillable acreage called lawns in housing subdivisions, or whether it's woodlands with a fair amount of rocks and stones and so forth that wouldn't lend itself to till, but is perfectly available for the building up and renovation and improvement of pastures in one way or another.
And power lines.
And power lines, yeah. Power lines, you can't build under power lines, so that land is available for pasture as well. And of course, that can be an assist to the power company because they can cut their budgets for chemicals and things of that sort, which did happen in New Hampshire for a while.
What happened to those sheep?
Yeah, that was sheep. They're in Mississippi. They went to Mississippi. They were all transported down there. And that project ended when the ownership of the utility changed. And the new owners said, we're not interested in doing this. Yeah, very sad, very unfortunate. Very little said about it, by the way. So most people just wondered and wondered for years what in the world happened because it wasn't really reported much in the press. So for zoning boards, I would caution them against thinking of an agricultural district because that implies that you can't or shouldn't have agriculture in other districts. And agriculture has to be in all places, whether it's flower pots with tomato plants or a small number of chickens in backyard. We have chickens in downtown Durham. We have chickens and egg production downtown, right in the middle of town. Doesn't have to be out in the countryside.
Another thing that Eric has urged is the towns not try to micromanage in zoning ordinances.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Different kinds of
yeah,
agriculture.
yeah.
Basically, a league has thrown out our specific regulations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. And you have to have a very broad definition of agriculture. But that is encouraged by the state of New Hampshire, which has a broad definition, and even by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, whose definition of agriculture involves a very, very small amount of money produced, monetary value produced in a year. So we're blessed with good definitions, and our state has a very good definition, and any town can adopt within its bylaws the state definition of agriculture, and that's really all that's necessary. Otherwise, in AgComs, you can get hung up with a definition of agriculture in an attempt to do an inventory, and you can't do a precise inventory. You can do something that gives you some idea of how much agriculture is in the town, but there's inevitably going to be more there than appears in the inventory.
We're working on comprehensive rezoning here in Rochester, if you've read the papers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't literally have 3 pigs next door to somebody, can you, or can you? I mean, is there...
Depends what your management system is. It really depends on your management system. Like, for example, you think of odors. Okay, here's an example. Go to the UNH Organic Dairy in Lee and see how much odor there is. Then go to the UNH conventional dairy called the Fairchild Dairy on campus and see how much odor there is. 2 totally different philosophies of agricultural management, 2 totally different systems, completely different. One has very, very strong odors that many, many people would strongly object to. The other system, with a sizable number of cows on grass, on pastures, very little in the way of odor. So how are you operating your system? And then, of course, when it comes to chickens, you know, do you really have to have roosters? Now, you do if you're going to breed, if you're going to be involved in breeding, but if it's purely eggs, you don't really have to have roosters. There's a lot of different systems that can be introduced. Plenty of opportunity. But we need to be concerned. We need to be concerned about people's economic circumstances, and I probably shouldn't have to say that too many times here in Strafford County. And we need to be concerned about where our food's going to come from. And increasingly, you know, food is in trouble now. The industrial system all over the world is in trouble. And food prices in the global market are rising very, very rapidly, partly through record-breaking droughts, record-breaking floods, record-breaking fires. How many other record-breaking situations do you want to talk about? And of course, right here in New Hampshire, record-breaking electrical outages in 2 years. In 2 years, well, you know, that's, you know, I don't know how you feel about climate change and those issues and so forth, but we can sure see the records being broken. So there's a lot to think about in all of this. So Pastures of Plenty talks a lot about direct marketing too, because direct marketing is critical to keep an economic flow of money to the hands of the farmers so they stay on the land and so that other people come on the land, because we need more farmers, we need more people on the land. There's got to be enough money to keep them going, and the key to that is direct marketing, no middleman. The money's got to go directly to the farmer, through the farmers markets, the CSAs, farm stands, all year round farm stores, which can be on the farm as well.
John, what do they grow for winter farmers? How do they do that?
Well, obviously you've got root crops, you've got canned and preserved products, you've got dairy product, you've got meat product, and you've got various other specialty product, and a small amount of cold season crops from an increasing number of hoop houses, grow tunnels, greenhouses, whatever you want to call them, small and big, small and large in that. So it's a pretty good diversity. But you know, Fredericton, New Brunswick in Canada has had a year-round farmers market in downtown Fredericton for 130 years. 130 years, and I have visited it. And if Fredericton, New Brunswick can do it, we can do it. Halifax has had a year-round downtown market also for a similar period of time. And in those cases, the cities provide the building because they think it's a social benefit. The farmers pay nothing to get a stall in the building.
Nova Scotia in January, that probably is a social event.
Yeah, yeah, so that's a social, and that's considered a proper function of provincial government up there. Here, we may or may not agree as to whether that's proper or not. But if you're concerned about food security, then you'd probably lean towards it's proper. Yeah.
Town of Lee Farmers Market is on town land, which means it's covered by town insurance, which helps a lot.
Okay.
And one of the issues I think that we've worked with is that with this idea of not regulating agriculture is that you want to, in your zoning ordinances, you want to encourage farmers. So we have agriculture permissible in all zones and stated that way.
Right. Agriculture permitted.
You don't want to micromanage.
Right. You don't want to micromanage. And Eric, among other people, is certainly very wise on these subjects, and he's a good practicing farmer with credibility as a farmer. And by the way, I am not a farmer. I don't claim to be a farmer. And so forth, but I place heavy reliance on those who are clearly farmers. And we worked hard to make sure that in Durham we have a farmer who is chair of the AgCom, and we have several other farmers. Even though we don't have a whole lot of farmers in Durham, we have several farmers on the AgCom. That adds to the credibility, and in many towns, if possible, it's the farmers who should have a majority to make a decision in the town, not the non-farmers. It's the farmers who have the insight and the experience. And so we put them, importantly, we put them on a pedestal because they have the challenge that those of us who are not farmers do not have. So that's very important. But I am a farmer to the degree that I eat. If you eat, you are committing an agricultural act. Yes. You are practicing agriculture, and I eat. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this infrastructure, this circle you had, one of the big problems we have in New Hampshire and in the whole Northeast is processing facilities, particularly livestock.
Yes, it is a problem.
That we have not got the facilities here, and there's no one seems to be coming forward to do that, and the restrictions and regulations that are put on.
Right.
A lot of these are put on for the big industrial systems, and they're not applicable or appropriate for what we're doing here.
Right.
And again, this gets back into the extension and other things too. These are the people that should be working with, or in touch with the farmers, and can get the innovative things that some people are doing around to the rest of the people.
Right.
But you need someone who can, well, that's what extension is supposed to be. It carries the information that should be developed at the research station to the people who can use it.
Right.
And if we're not doing that much research, at least if you've got individual farmers that are doing their own experiments, this is where a lot of people are getting innovative things. You need someone who can be out there and coordinate that and say, oh, look what's happening here, and get people together.
And yet a lot of what I'm talking about is so much at the grassroots that you have people who are slaughtering chickens in the basement or the backyard and giving them, not selling, giving them to other people in return for goods and services of one sort or another. That sort of thing is increasing. Whether you call that quasi-legal, a little bit at the edge, is obviously a question. Another question about regulations. Portsmouth Farmers Market does not allow chickens to be sold at the market. You just have to cross the line into any of the towns, and it's legal to sell chickens, and it's legal to sell chickens in various cities. But the health director of Portsmouth makes a decision that it's not legal for health reasons to sell chickens in Portsmouth. The irony is that the chickens that would be sold by the farmers in Portsmouth are healthier than the chickens sold in the grocery stores of Portsmouth. And so my challenge to the director of health of the city of Portsmouth is, how come you're not doing anything about the chickens in those supermarkets that have salmonella, and most of them have salmonella at some level or another, and most of the chickens grown locally do not have salmonella, they're healthier, but you're not doing anything about the grocery stores. Now, of course, I know the answer to the question. They're protected, USDA inspected, all the rest of it, but they're not healthy. That doesn't say they're healthy. And the irony is they're not as healthy as the chickens that would be sold fresh or frozen in the farmer's market. And so if you want to buy the chickens, you go to the Exeter farmer's market and buy from the same farmer who would have sold it to you in Portsmouth except the city health department says you can't sell chickens